So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me. Thank you to Paco de la Torre. He called me a few weeks ago. He asked me to come a few weeks ago. I was supposed to go to Buenos Aires, but I decided to come here because he's a good friend of mine. So unfortunately, I can only stay for 10 minutes because then I will have to go to the airport because I do have a flight to take to Buenos Aires. Socially, it's a very complicated time in France. There is a lot of incertitude. It's difficult to get around at this time. And so that's why it's important to be resilient in cities, especially when there are social tensions. I would like to speak to you of the importance of this idea of sustainability. The topic of the day is the urban era towards a sustainable city. And I just wanted to speak about sustainability, something that I work with my colleague of mine at the Sorbonne, Mohamed. Sustainability means zero carbon and not leaving anyone out, not leaving anyone behind. In the 21st century, we need to create social and economic value. We need that each euro that is invested needs to have an impact socially and environmentally for the cities and for ecology. We don't want to just protect natural resources. We want to create a new urban area that can reduce our carbon footprint and improve our lifestyles and our quality of life, and that will create a more habitable city. We want to create cities that are easier to live in. So during globalization, in this time where there are a lot of war, the economy needs to create jobs. We need to create jobs locally. We need to be able to create good offerings for services. Jobs need to have this approach. It needs to be a more local approach. We need
creando las largas distancias, creando los grandes desplazamientos y creando lo que pasa en la ciudad de París hoy en día, que una huelga.
In the 80s, people were having to travel long distances to go to work. We need to stop this. And we see today that once there is manifestations or demonstrations in a city, everything stops.
Mientras que la gente vive más al este, cada vez más al este, generando todos los días a las mismas horas.
We see that a lot of business is happening in La Défense, whereas most people live on the other side of the city. And so every time that there are strikes, there's a big problem. Too many people are having to commute from east to west. 1.2 million people are having to take the line 13 from east to west, because in the 80s and 90s, these transportation systems were created. Richard Senar, a consultant for the United Nations,
La economía, para tener
And
ciudades
so
viables,
we have lost this proximity that we had.
de una política de inclusión social
For cities to be easy to live in, we
no
need to
podemos
have
simplemente decir que digamos
a social policy in place that makes it more fair. These politics need to be fairer.
tienen que practicar la mixidad.
Cities need, and for cities to be able to be fair, they need to take into account social the different people in society.
Los edificios sufrieron en la visión de la Carta de Atenas.
There are more.
Guerra, después de los años 60, un proceso de gentrificación absoluto que ha llevado
After the
a que las zonas
60s,
residenciales del oeste de París se transformaran en zonas corporativas de trabajo. Los edificios haussmannianos se convirtieron en
and
lugares
so the places that are inhabitable in the West,
entramos en una separación
people only work there. There are only areas where people work, and so we are seeing a separation in cities. We work in the West.
las sedes sociales de las empresas.
This is where we see ambassadors,
En el noreste,
embassies rather.
en zonas populares, en zonas de hábitat social.
And if we live on the east, that's where there's more immigration, there are poorer neighborhoods.
Entonces,
And when we go,
social tiene que llevar una gran mixidad
so
social.
social inclusion needs to take care of this, take into account this social mix.
Las clases populares en los barrios del noreste.
We can't continue with the models that are in place.
Siglo XX de París, por ejemplo, tenga dentro de su estructura de 200.000 ciudadanos una parte de la ciudad.
In the 20th arrondissement, we see, for example,
La densidad más grande que existe en Europa.
there are
Esos tres elementos.
50,000 people who live in the 20th arrondissement in Paris.
Más viable, más vivable, más equitable. Ha llevado
This is not acceptable. We need to have a city that is
a
fairer.
la campaña electoral de la elección del 2020.
Thanks to the work that we did with Anne Hidalgo
Política urbana
for her 2020 campaign, we created a program, a concept, an urban concept,
el policentrismo
that the proximity of work work needs to be closer to where people live. This is part of the transition of the social transition of the city. People need to be able to choose whether they want to commute to work or not. There needs to be more pedestrian walkways. People need to use their cars, rather their bicycles more.
Una de ellas está aquí, justamente, mostrando la importancia del polimorfismo funcional.
Today there are work centers within the city.
Un metro cuadrado, múltiples usos, cada uso de modos posibles. Aquí en la Puerta de Versalles tenemos una incubadora que
You have to be able to have 1 meter squared that can be used for different uses in Paris. The space needs to be able to use it in different ways. In the 15th arrondissement, we are working on creating spaces for sports. And so we are seeing these changes take place in Paris, and there is an economic aspect to it as well. But all of this needs to be done while keeping the social mix in mind. And so I invite you to go and visit the east side of Paris, between Châtelet and Porte de Clichy. We have created a neighborhood called Clichy-Batignolles. This is a lot of social mix in this neighborhood. It's possible to go into the different living spaces. You can exercise outside. There is a park, the Luther King Park. We have transformed this area, which used to be an old railway station, and we have created a neighborhood, a neighborhood with a lot of biodiversity. There's a park. The buildings are aesthetically pleasing.
Lo que tenemos en esta zona, el Clichy-Batignolles del Oeste, lo vemos hoy en día.
So what we have seen in Clichy-Batignolles,
Toda la ciudad. Podemos hoy en día ver muchos lugares en los cuales había un solo uso.
this is an example that we can see in a lot of cities.
Que ahora se ha convertido en un barrio con David Chipperfield,
Near Bastille, there was a neighborhood that was with a lot of buildings that were administrative buildings. And today we have changed that. There are cultural zones, markets, expositions, there are local businesses, and all of this is part of what makes Paris so special.
Que es una empresa de ciudad que maneja los bienes raíces inmobiliarios dedicados al comercio local. La ciudad maneja esos
There
locales,
is
compran muchos más y
a
se alquilan por
business that
precios
manages all of the
de
local
metro
businesses.
cuadrado raíz. ¿Para
And
qué?
thanks to
Para
this,
instalar carniceros, desde
local business owners can benefit from lower prices. So
centros de exposiciones,
there are people who sell different products, there are cultural centers,
gentrificación, porque necesitamos desarrollar
and we can see that everywhere in the
de
city.
una manera muy intensa.
It's really important to create this social mix. I can keep talking about this. I could spend all day talking about this and ask you to go and visit all of these places that exist today. We have 169 schools in Paris, and we are transforming a mini urban park to be able to create pedestrian walkways, places where you can hang out. And with these, out of these 169 schools, we have worked with already 150 schools out of them. And this is part of our urban policy. It's important for us to work on the cities and to not have streets that are only open for usage for cars.
Estrecho ha sido adoptado por CGLU, la Confederación Mundial de Instituciones Territoriales. Ya son decenas y decenas de ciudades en el mundo que lo aplican.
There are a lot of cities that are applying this model because we have thought of the rights of people in these cities, their right to use these cities. We are creating decent housing, decentralized, where you don't need to commute as much to go to work, where there's local work, where there are local businesses. And also to be able to protect the physical and psychological health of the citizens, and also to have spaces within the neighborhoods that are used for many different things. We're going to publish a book and it's going to talk about our urban policy. It's going to be the use of and at the end of the book, we're going to speak about the Pacific circulation within a city. So it is important to keep all of this in mind in Paris and for other cities as well. This observatory of the cities, we developed it with Smart City of Barcelona and
presidida por aquí en París y instalada mundialmente. Viajó a Argentina justamente a instalar el capítulo de América Latina y que nos permitirá reunir alcaldes, investigadores.
And we're going to work in Latin America, and here in Paris, there will be mayors, stakeholders,
policéntrica, multiservicial, multifuncional,
And of course,
sea una oportunidad feliz porque nos permite regenerar nuestras ciudades frente al desafío climático, al desafío económico de la pobreza y al desafío social de la necesidad de una ciudad más inclusiva.
and that all of these changes in the city will allow us to face all of the environmental challenges that we will have to face. Unfortunately, I have to leave, but thank you very much for your attention.